had a murder. I was detective sergeant, and the confession took all of 3 minutes. What the offender did was he threw his neighbor off of an apartment balcony. And so I get him into the interview room and said, "What happened today?" And he said, "I got mad at my neighbor and I threw him off the balcony." And I said, "Oh, well, throwing him off the balcony, you had to know that would kill him." And he looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to kill him, so I did it." And we were like, the state's attorney was outside the room, and I'm like, "I think we're done."
Roy, thank you for being here today. By way of introduction, I wanted to provide a brief overview of your law enforcement career. You started with the Lombard Illinois Police Department in August of 1987 as a community service officer and civilian desk officer. In December of 1994, you were hired as a full-time sworn police officer at the same agency. During the course of your career, you served as a patrol officer, sergeant, detective sergeant, street lieutenant, and deputy chief. Your collateral duties included field training officer, defensive tactics instructor, Citizens Police Academy coordinator, and police academy supervisor at the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy. In 2017, you were appointed to serve as the Chief of Police of the Lombard Police Department. You were chairman of the Police Academy Advisory Board, and you were a member of the Illinois Chiefs of Police Legislative Committee, the DuPage Chiefs of Police Association Executive Board, and you ultimately served as the president of that organization. You retired from the Lombard Police Department in March of 2023. Chief, thank you for agreeing to share your story.
Thank you for having me.
So what was your childhood like?
It was great. It was a hard-nosed upbringing, a very Catholic family. My dad, a retired Marine and a construction executive. My mom then was stay-at-home. I was the youngest of 8, so there was always something going on in the house. Interestingly, you did homework every night, whether you think you had it or not. You had to do some homework. We were not allowed to watch TV during the school week. And then, of course, you had duties, jobs around the house. The typical empty the dishwasher or take out the garbage. But grateful, went to Catholic grade school and then public high school. And just, learned a lot from, obviously my older siblings, and then, just a really good, never wanted for anything, but I knew my dad worked really hard to provide, so it was a really good life.
What did you end up doing after high school?
I went to college. I went to 2-year community college at College of DuPage, and I really had no direction. I just got lucky being brought on by the Lombard Police Department. I was an explorer there, and when I got lucky that a community service job opened up, and because I didn't know what I was going to do after my 2 years associates. I didn't know if I was going to go to a 4-year. My dad got transferred to Michigan, so I didn't know if I was going with them, and I got hired, and I ended up staying here in Lombard and was really on my own.
So what drew you to law enforcement, and how old were you when you became interested in getting involved in law enforcement?
I was that 6-year-old kid in kindergarten when they said, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" And I knew then I wanted to be a policeman. No idea how this happened. There is no law enforcement anywhere in extended family, cousins, anything like that. It's just something that hit me as that little kid riding his bike, and you'd see a police car go by and you were wowed on it, and it never ever left me. I mean, I had a scanner when I was like 12, and My parents bought me an upgraded scanner for Christmas when I was 16. The Explorer post started when I was 16. Just luck that started. Never even heard of Explorers before. And so, I was consumed in that. And we had a very, very active post because the Lombard Police Department really supported it well. So we were a pretty active post, and then just fell into the next job. So.
Did you live in Lombard? Is that how you ended up?
Yes, I'm almost that real life success story of grew up in town, school in town. All I ever wanted to be was a cop, but more so a Lombard police officer. I umpired baseball since I was like 12 years old up to probably 30 years old in the baseball league. I coached at our local high school as a volunteer assistant, So I was just that kid who did everything in Lombard. And then even when I was on my own, I lived in Lombard. I didn't move out of Lombard until I was probably, I think I was mid-40s or so.
So what did the academy look like for you? So you get the opportunity comes to a test for Lombard, and you're selected, and they send you to academy. Where did they send you, and what did that look like for you?
So I went to the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy at the College of DuPage, and it was just starting. So I was the second class, and this is a very interesting story. I had a chief then who wanted to send us to the State Police Academy. And through my years as a CSO, I led a pretty good life, so I wasn't physically prepared. And I walked into his office and I said, listen, I'm not sure if I'm physically prepared for that. And he said, well, when can you be? And I said, well, if you send me to the next class that I think started in February of '95, I said, I will make sure I'm ready. And I had a complete transformation of, I worked out, but I didn't know what I was doing and how the body even worked then. But wow, I became, I could run and, lift and I got in shape. And, he again gave me that opportunity to wait and send me to the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy.
Did you go with anybody else from your department?
Yes, it's funny. My friend who I got hired with, Tom Wersing, we got hired together, and we leapfrog each other's careers all the way. I made sergeant, he made sergeant. He made lieutenant, I made lieutenant. He made deputy chief, and so on. Excuse me. And so he is now the chief of police after I retired as the chief of police. But it's funny, our joke was, oh, you're the kid who was hired with Roy, because everyone knew me, and he was this guy who, came in not knowing anything about Lombard. That's when you tested with, 20 departments at a time, and whoever took you got in. So he had never even been to Lombard other than to test. So we went to the academy together and then had really successful careers, obviously.
So you already had a history with the Lombard Police Department prior to graduating the academy. So was there a difference for you when you graduated, other than the job that you're doing, when you graduated and you show up for work the first day after the academy?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because there was a lieutenant. He liked me. I mean, we always got along. He liked me, but he made sure that I was a first day and a cop and a first phase in FTO. Like he kept me grounded. Not that I ever had that ego side or I know how to do this, but he made sure that didn't happen. And he made sure he would stick me with guys on a ride along that, were guys he knew my personality didn't fit. And it was just his way of really saying, okay, you know, you had a good life as a CSO and you could come and go, but no, you know, now you're the real thing and you're going to perform like the real thing. So it ended up, you know, I didn't have the drama of having to learn the town or learn how to write our report writing system. So it was a very easy FTO process. But I knew what this lieutenant was doing, and I never said anything. I never had airs. You know, I just, okay, yeah, I get it. And I'm like anyone else who gets hired the first day and goes on. So now my FTO was accelerated. Obviously, I didn't have to do the whole time, but still had to do, you know, learn traffic stops and all that, and domestics and DUI. So there was a good learning period there as well.
So kind of take me through a timeline or an overview of your career, your progression through the ranks during your time at Lombard.
Yeah, I got promoted really early. I was a defensive tactics instructor before I was off probation, because they knew me and they trusted me, which is, you know, in the world of law enforcement, you just don't get anything until you're off probation, and then some years after that. So that was, and you know, the grumblings were, oh, look what he gets. But then I was an FTO right out of probation. They sent me to school for FTO. So I was on midnights because we were a department where, you know, we were seniority based, so you were on midnights when your first couple of years. Then I had the opportunity to go into detectives early. I had about 5 years on, and that was, you know, they submit a memo of your interest of detectives. And I remember the sergeant and lieutenant of detectives at the time said, you know, you should really put a memo in. And I said, I like the road. They looked at me and said, no, you should put a memo in. And so I got the hint, obviously. Through that time, I was also on the union board, and I was the vice president of the union for a year, and then I became president of our union. So it was roughly 2001, I took the sergeant's test. And, you know, for practice, I had no anticipation of ever being promoted or, so you got to take one to see what it's like. Well, 30 guys took the test and only 9 passed. So, and I was one of them. You know, I get my oral interview was really good and my score, so I finished really, really high outside, you know, inside rather, of some veterans. And in 2002, I got promoted to sergeant. So, and that was pretty interesting because, you know, there were guys I worked with as a CSO who, you know, that now I'm their boss on the shift. So that, I think, I never had a problem with it, but I think some people did along the way. But I knew if I proved myself as a good, productive, working sergeant that was out there, that, you know, they would come around, and they eventually did. And then, you know, I don't think we ever gave a lieutenant's test, because after I made sergeant, we were pretty solid in ranks, like there was no movement. And it wasn't until roughly 2009 that I then took the lieutenant's test and, you know, was a lieutenant. And again, that I was bouncing back and forth between midnights and afternoon shift. During those sergeant years, I was a street sergeant, then I went into the investigations unit, and it worked out perfectly for me because I had the opportunity to go back to school and finish a bachelor's degree while I was sergeant of detectives. So that was really, kind of lucky that all just worked out. And then, did deputy chief for about 3.5, 4 years. And the chief then, we knew he was going to retire, and he came into my office one day and he said, it's about a year from now that I'm leaving. And I said, yeah, I know, you've told us. And he said, no, you need to start preparing. And I looked at him. I said, what? He said, you need to prepare to move over to the next office. And I was like, whoa. I had never set my eyes ever on being the chief. Educationally, in the Chicagoland area, they look for masters and FBI Academy, and I didn't have any of that. And it was, basically told me, start taking classes through the training portals and, kind of shadow me, and it was kind of weird, but I was like, well, I did every other rank, I guess I can do this. So that was really the biggest blessing ever. I never thought I would ever be a chief, never wanted to be a chief. You know how there's people who, like, in their first year, well, someday I'm going to be the chief here, and I was never that way. I was a working cop pretty much my whole career, even as a lieutenant. When I made deputy chief, it was really my first time working Monday through Friday, like 8 to 4:30. I never did that. I was always a shift officer. Even in detectives, we had shifts of detectives, so I was 3 to 11 or. So it was just weird when I made that, because then I knew, okay, I'm not on the road anymore. But what a great opportunity to become the chief in 2017 and lead the agency that I grew up wanting to work at my whole life. So it's pretty cool.
So when you look back over your career, you've had the opportunity to do a lot of things and be in a lot of positions. What are some of the high points?
Well, there's just when I was the union president, we were going through some pretty tough contract negotiations, and again, I had never paid attention to that stuff. And wow, when you sit across the table from your own chief who is now on the admin side, and he has to tell you, well, you can't really have that. And then the village side and their attorney, who is, they're labor attorneys, so they're just hard-nosed, that's ridiculous, ask. But then we're on the other side like, well, we work for you. Well, you should do it because you like us. So that was, we got a really, really good contract during that time when I was the president of the union, and it was a markable contract. It was like, okay, this is percentages we haven't seen before. So that was really kind of a highlight there. My time in detectives was, wow, just even as a sergeant, as a case detective, and even as a sergeant was pretty awesome. We did some high profile cases. I had just 3 heater cases that really culminated in just some really good outcomes. That required confessions and a ton of legwork and boots out to the ground type law enforcement. So those years in detectives, even as and as sergeant, you know, I did a murder case, and you know, so that was pretty wild. My years as lieutenant were that was interesting, because now you're running the shift and the sergeants. So, you know, you remember how you worked as a sergeant. Now you may have one sergeant that was maybe a working sergeant, and the other one was, well, I made sergeant, so, you know, I sit at my desk. And that was always hard for me, because, you know, I didn't think sergeants, to me, should be out on the road with their team. So, you know, I just really, really good memories and high points of just some high profile cases. And then, you know, being a big part of our Citizen Police Academy. We started the Citizen Police Academy, myself and the deputy chief at the time, and a sergeant and another patrolman. We were like a team of 4, and they sent us to Little Rock, Arkansas to learn how to do one. And now, you know, our Citizen Police Academy still goes to this day, and we have a really, really huge alumni program. So just things like that over the years have really been many, many highlights.
So let me go back for a minute, because I failed to ask, and I think people watching, you know, they hear all these positions and ranks within your organization, but we failed to describe the Lombard Police Department.
So Lombard's a you know, middle income community. We're a mall community. We have a large you know, mall that was our economic engine. It's what always was a community somewhere between 43 and 46,000. We ran roughly, in the high day, 75 officers, and then our numbers went down to roughly, you know, 69, 68 during some economic downturn. So we're always hovering there. Very typical, you know, suburban style department with 3. We still, or they to this day still run 3 shifts, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. Haven't fallen into the 12-hour, you know, thing. Rank was a chief, 2 deputy chiefs. At the high time, again, during good times, 5 lieutenants, 1 for detectives, 3 on a shift, and 1 admin detective or lieutenant. And then we hovered between 8, 9, and 10 sergeants. So 2 on each shift, 1 sergeant in detectives, and then 1 civilian sergeant who ran records and accreditation over the year, and traffic. So, and a traffic sergeant, I could say. So over the years, when we had a cut, okay, this guy can run traffic, and we'll cut that position. But you know, a good rank structure department with good opportunity for advancement. We always ran about 10 detectives, with usually a school resource officer and a TAC team, and then each shift had, you know, the rest, and a traffic unit that was mostly centered on truck enforcement. Lombard's a very busy, sneaky busy community, I always said. We have 3 east-west corridors that run through the town, so from Chicago into our town, and then we have highway exits that are on our north and south end as well. So the mall and the big box stores are certainly our economic engine, and then 3 different large industrial parks. So always just you know, just a rip and running department for a call load. We always led the county in our call load. Not that we were a dangerous community, we were just always busy. We're huge traffic law enforcement department, ever since I started, DUIs were our bailiwick, if you will. If you joined Lombard, you were going to learn how to do DUIs, and you were going to make DUIs, and you were going to go to nights, and you were going to do DUIs. There was no getting around it. And I would say for the past 25, 30, even more, but during my years as sergeant on nights and lieutenant, and even in my years as chief, we always finished the top 10 in the state in DUI enforcement. For a town that runs 6 or 7 guys on midnights, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for sure. So traffic was a big part of your agency's identity. Are there any traffic stops that stand out for you from your career?
I remember my first traffic stop as a cop, and it was a DUI. And the guy did the fields, and they were, he didn't pass them, but you could say, all right. Now, we didn't have PBTs then, so you were going basically off of the field sobriety test. So my FTO looked at me and said, well, it's your decision. And I ended up arresting him. Well, I got him back to the station, and he blew like an 09. Well, 10 was the limit. So it was just, and I ended up losing it in court. I remember, it was a first of everything. I went first SS, and then lost the SS, and then obviously lost the trial. So from my first traffic stop, it was like, boom, Doom City. But, just some... I remember that. I used to love running. So we have 2 east-west, 3, but the 2 big ones were North Avenue, which is on our very north end, and Butterfield Road, which is our south end. Well, those are just open roads, and people would just fly. Well, I used to love running radar, but you had to be doing 25 over for me to move. And everybody was Butterfield Road over here, as you know, being in the town next to us. I mean, people were doing 90 miles an hour on a regular basis. So that was my thing. I used to love getting big time speeders because they were easy to get. So.
Is there a particular incident? You mentioned some cases while you were in investigations. Is there a particular incident that you either was very complex, very surprising, or something you're just really proud of?
I was really proud of an aggravated arson case. It was a kid in town who I knew. I didn't know him well, but I knew of him, and he knew of me. He played baseball in town, and I was very active in the community as a baseball umpire and a baseball coach. And he lit his house on fire for, the insurance claim. Obviously, financial issues, and so we ended up setting up a wire with his friend, and listened to hours of him talking with his friend in the parking lot, or and we finally, after a couple of times of his friend wearing the wire on him, he said, yeah, I had to do it, I'm losing the house. And so then our state's attorney wanted a confession. So that confession took about 8 hours of just constant getting him to that point, and then he would pull back. And but it was just just a long case with it's so TV with the wire, and you had no offender. You thought it was just a house fire, and then it turns into you're starting to develop things. This is an arson. Okay, who did it? And then you look into the financial side, and this kid's in trouble. And so it ended up he confessed and got a pretty good sentence for it. There was another guy who grew up in town. He knew my brothers. They were in the same class, but he stabbed his family, 3 kids and his wife, and he didn't kill them, but he went, had a bad night, obviously, and stabbed his family, and then tried to blow up the house. He took the stove and flipped it over, and the gas line, was leaking. And our street officers, luckily, went in there and saved their lives by getting them out and, caring for their wounds. I was the sergeant of detectives. Well, in our department, a major case, the detective sergeant was the lead on the case. And, that was obviously complex, a ton of evidence. And then I had to get the confession out of him, and he confessed, and he got sentenced for. He's probably still in prison now for. I think it was 5 counts of attempted murder, and then we had a murder. I was detective sergeant, and the confession took all of 3 minutes. Read him his rights. What the offender did was he threw his neighbor off of an apartment balcony. And so I get him into the interview room and said, "What happened today?" And he said, "I got mad at my neighbor and I threw him off the balcony." And I said, "Oh, well, throwing him off the balcony, you had to know that would kill him." And he looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to kill him, so I did it." And we were like, the state's attorney was outside the room, and I'm like, "I think we're done." And so it was just, wow, a murder case, and your confession lasted all of 3 to 5 minutes. But there is one, in fact, me and my partner, Tom Wersing, worked on it, and bothers me to this day. There's a young kid, 19, 20, 21, whatever he was, and he killed his baby in the crib. And, the standard, wouldn't stop crying, and he wouldn't confess. He just wouldn't, and we couldn't prove it. That's when SIDS was still pretty prevalent, and the coroner at the time was like, "Well, if you get him to confess, I can match medically with him, but right now I can't prove anything else," and nor could we, and we knew he did it. I mean, we knew he did it, and we had to eventually release him, and I went to his girlfriend's house because I had to bring something back. I think the blanket or something just odd, and I had to bring it back. And I remember handing her my card and said, "Yeah, you knew what happened here, and you know this, and someday, it's gonna get you, and you're gonna say something, and here's my card." And I don't know whatever happened to him or her, but that one, we wanted that confession bad and could never get it.
So did policing in the town that you grew up, because there's 2 incidents and you're like, this kid knew my brother and I knew this guy, and did that ever present any problems for you?
No, it's funny you mention that, because those 2 cases were the biggest cases probably I've had, but I never had to arrest anyone for DUI that I knew, or you'd go to a verbal domestic here and there, and I grew up with their kid or something. But as odd as it was growing up there, didn't have many calls. It was the social events, the car shows, the taste of Lombard, the carnivals, all the stuff you worked, on the side or special duty that you would run into people. I remember you. Oh, my son. So those were more the times that you would run into someone, but it never presented like, I know you shouldn't do this to me. It was never a situation like that.
Have you ever been on a call, an incident, a traffic stop, where you get that feeling of something's just not right with this?
Yeah, it was was one of my only write-ups I ever had. A guy escaped from me out of booking. So, and I should have read it. I read it that night, but I didn't pay attention to it. So I was a shoplifter at the Jewel on midnights. Jewel is a grocery store we have in the Chicagoland area. And they stayed open 24 hours. And this guy stole, some like meat and cheese, something really just innocuous. Well, then he was wanted on a warrant for child molestation. So that was the bigger thing, of course. And he was just weird and freaky from the get-go. So I bring him to the station. I bring him in. I was a patrolman at the time. And I bring him into our booking room. And again, this is when you had payphones. So we had a handcuff by the payphone. So I handcuffed him to the phone. And our booking room door, you had to pull it shut. And no one ever did, because the guy's handcuffed or they're in the, on the bench or something like that, in the bullpen we called it. So, you just, because to get out you had to press a 6-digit code. So, cops, whatever lazy moment they could get. So it was just standard practice in our agency when you had someone, don't pull the door shut. So I was typing the report and going through the booking stuff, and I kept looking over because the guy's kind of in front of me but off to my right. I see him jiggling the cuff, and I should have paid attention from the get-go with him out on the road, and he slipped out of that cuff and he took off right out the door. And our back door to our building was within 10 feet of our booking door, so he was gone. Now, I just screamed, oh my God. And I get on the radio and, I'm like, I'm chasing the guy. Well, first, he knew to slam the door, so I had to press the 6-digit code, and I run out of the building. And, he was out of shape and older, so I could see him running. But imagine, I have no handcuffs, because they're on the hook next to the payphone. The baton, we didn't carry a taser then, so I own the baton and your gun you put in the lockup. So I had nothing on me, and just my radio and me running after this guy. And I caught up to him and it was just one of those moments where you have this weird strength where you just tackle him and you're able to hold him till everyone gets there. But that was, obviously I let a prisoner escape, and deservedly so. I got a letter of reprimand. So, but that one, I should have seen it, and who knows? On midnights, you're tired, you're lazy, whatever, and didn't pay attention to all the signs.
So this one's closely related to that. Is there an incident where you think, man, I wish I could get a do-over on that?
Oh, I'm sure. One, the confession I told you about. There was another confession that this guy, we got the confession, but he ran the confession. Like, we let him eat while we were talking to him, and that was his barrier. And It was just dumb. You know, you would never do that, but you're trying to play nice. And I would say I think the do-over came as chief. You know, we used to give letters of appreciation, but then they became like, oh, guy showed up to work, he gets a letter. They came kind of silly. And so when I was the chief, I continued the program, but I tiered it down. You know, listen, you caught a burglar, yeah, I'm giving you a letter, or obviously you saved a life, or did CPR, you know, or you solved a big case. Well, but there were a ton of arrests that guys had, like retail thefts that, you know, this is a 10-time offender, and they caught him coming from 10 different towns. And, you know, there are a lot of cases that had legwork, or cops did some really good work from a simple traffic stop. And a patrolman retired. I think I was the chief in my 3rd or 4th year, and a patrolman retired, and I read his exit interview that HR does. And he wrote in there that he was really disappointed because he did some really good police work and never got recognized. And he said in there, we used to give letters of appreciation, and my last 2 years on the job, I never got one. And I sat there and I read this, and I'm like, oh my God. And you know, that was a definite do-over.
Have you ever, and I apologize because these questions are pretty closely related. Have you ever done something in any position within the organization and later thought, you know what, that probably wasn't the best decision, that wasn't the best thing to do?
Oh, there was one, I'm sure there were, you know, as sergeants, you talk to some, you know, guys. It took me a while to realize, you know, listen, there's going to be a guy on midnights who's just flat out tired. And, you know, he's going to pull into the park or behind the building in the industrial park. And, you know, I failed to understand that initially. You know, I was like, come on, let's go, get out. What do you mean you had no traffic stops last night? Or, you know, this whole 5-day stretch, you've made 3 traffic stops. What are you doing? And it took me a while to, you know, come to, you know, there's guys have families and they're going to court, and if their wife's working, they got to stay up. And so, you know, I kind of had, you know what, if you're tired, let me know. I'll give you a longer lunch. You can get a nap in. But here's the deal. I had this, like, you can't do this every night. I get, because we used to work 5-day stretches. I get 1 out of those 5 days, you're just not going to be there. But when I need you to be there, you got to be there. But it can't be all 4 or 5 nights. You know, I'll give you the leeway on 1. So that was, you know, that's something that, yeah, it took me a while to kind of realize, and I would have redone things probably, or had a better understanding. But what was the last part of the question, or what was, I think I kind of went off.
No, I mean, it was close. Your answer is very close to the question. It's just an action that you took, and you later realized that probably wasn't the best course of action.
Well, this was a case, and it wasn't a fault of mine, but I didn't get it until it happened. We had a fatal accident, kid on a motorcycle, parents lived in Michigan. He had to, you know, he got, you know, killed. in a motorcycle accident at his own doing. He was a reckless driver. We had complaints on him, and he ended up crashing and killing himself. And so one, you have to do that death notification over the phone. And then, which, was wrong. You should have sent the agency where they lived. I think we tried, but I don't know what happened. But when they came down to, retrieve his effects and whatnot, it was my case as the detective. And they were in the lobby, and they had set up an appointment for them to bring his stuff. And I walked out in the lobby in a brown paper shopping bag that had his wallet and his shoes and I think his necklace, and a watch or something. And as I walk out, into the lobby with this just shopping bag, the parents absolutely lost it. And I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? What's going on? I'm very sorry. And they just said, just the moment you walked out, and the last thing I see of my son is in a shopping bag. And I'm just like, oh, never, I hadn't even think of that. Where we should have just had it in a nice, Tupperware thing or in our own hands, just shows that, I got a evidence clerk, hand me the evidence, and they put it, it's just a bad moment.
Yeah. So, changing gears, what are some of your fondest memories of the job?
Just really being successful there and having a great time over the years. It's it's the only thing I wanted to do. If I was struck down tomorrow and said, you're got a second chance, I would go right back at it. The people that in some way you helped, that you might not ever know you did, but you did. The kids who, when I was on the job, but I was a volunteer assistant for the high school baseball team for, I think it was 9 or 10 years. And out of those years, there's about 8 cops out of, those years of baseball teams that I coached. And that's really, really cool, because I started coaching there when I was a community service officer, and then when I became a cop, I was on midnight, so I still had the opportunity to be involved in the program there. So that was really, it's neat, because some of them are, I see, and so they're still out there. And some were in Lombard, but some were in other communities as well. But just obviously the friendships you make over the years, not within your own department, but with other departments. When you go to classes with the guy who works in the town next to you, or 2 towns over that you see here and there, but then you become to know. And so those moments of the camaraderie of the shifts, going out on shift parties. When you worked midnights, we got off at 7, and I think it was once a month we went, we had bars in town that opened up at 7 a.m. for the night shift factory. And, God, going to have a beer at 7:30 in the morning. But those were the funnest times, where you would just talk about, oh my God, remember that guy last night that we just had? So just the special friendships. And it is your family at some point, or your second family, of course. I always maintained my high school friends, but, you know, much more distance. You know, we get together a couple of times a year, but, you know, the cop friends become your real friends. So just all the friendships you had made, and, you know, going on trips. Oh my God, there was a stretch of, I think, 3, 4, 5 years in a row where we went to Las Vegas for this guy's bachelor party, you know. And then there was 8 of us that went on a golf trip every winter for, wow, probably 20 years in a row. We would, you know, every February we would go on a 4 or 5 day golf trip. So just great moments like that.
Was there anyone during the course of your career, whether inside your agency or outside of it, that you considered to be a mentor?
Well, I live by the, some people come into your life as blessings, some people come into your life as lessons. So I was able to learn from both. Yeah, obviously, my first chief who I ever worked for, he hired me as a community service officer because I was an explorer there, and that position opened up. And the sergeant who ran the explorer unit told me this. He said, you know, the chief just wants you to have this job. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, just give it to that kid that's always here. His name was Bill Hogan. Oh, hardcore Marine, you know, tattoos, Vietnam era guy, just a rough guy. He was one of those, because I'm the chief and I said so type guys. But really a great man who gave me an opportunity. And when I made chief, he stopped into the police department. Now this is, God, what, 25 years later? So wow, talk about, you know, having that misty-eyed moment of, this guy remembered me, now knows I'm the chief, and came in as, you know, a long ago retired chief. My second chief, fairly unpopular guy within the walls, but, you know, he's the one I went to and said, I'm not physically ready. And he said, I want you to work here, so you tell me, you know. So obvious, huge amount of respect for him. And then, of course, the chief I worked for the last 15 years, Chief Byrne, who set me up, you know, it's just a fantastic guy. Learned so much from him. Such a mellow, process thinking guy. Always looked at things from that 30,000 foot view, and, you know, went through everything just nice and slow, never got riled, and just a really fair and caring guy. Of course, there were other mentors or supervisors, or even there were patrolmen that, you know, always encouraged me, you know, take the next test, let's go, you can do this. And then, you know, when I was voted president of the union, it wasn't a union where you served as secretary, vice president, then you had to, you know, that group of patrolmen, even though I only had like 5 years on as a cop, they voted me to be president. So there was some there with them. And then over the course of the years, when you look at the lessons of, man, sometimes the infighting or just the, I want, why not me? You know, I learned a lot from that too. So yeah, lot of help, but there was a lot of lessons I learned that I'm not going that direction.
So you've, not just as chief, but as deputy chief, a lieutenant, a sergeant, and your role out at the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy. You've, I'm sure, had to make a lot of difficult decisions. What stands out in your mind is one of the toughest decisions that you've had to make?
I've had 3 resign or be fired decisions, obviously as the chief, of people I worked with my whole career that, one that started even before me, 2 that started before me, and one that he was a friend throughout the years. Some bad decisions occurred, and it was like, you have your time and age, you should really think about leaving. So those were hard, just because, you're now the chief and you have to do that type of thing. The hardest, so I was made chief in July of 2017, and we had an officer pass away in January of 2018. So 6 months I was the chief on the job. And he was that very typical, everybody liked him, and it's a true story. His name's Mike. Everybody loved Mike. Just a happy-go-lucky, great guy, worked hard, great cop, only 45 years old. Obviously some internal health problems that, obviously caught up to him at a very young age. And one night he went home from 3 to 11 shift as a detective, and that was it. So here I am holding the bag of this department of getting that call at 6 o'clock in the morning saying the paramedics just took Mike to the hospital. And so Tom Wurzing and I, we had to go to the hospital, and we get there and, he's deceased. And, having to tell all his friends who were coming into the hospital, because they got called too, that, Mike has passed away. And then having to do, talk to his wife, who I had never met. You don't meet people's spouses on a regular basis. And then going back to the department and, calling a department-wide meeting for that afternoon to, tell everyone and figure out what we're going to do as an agency. And unfortunately, this is after another officer in DuPage County recently was killed the month before. And as you know, DuPage County was up on things in a group of togetherness. And I remember when that officer passed away, that department closed. And other towns ran their agency for the time of the wake, the day of the wake, and the day of the funeral. And I went to my village manager, and I said, we're closing. Now here I'm just the chief for 6 months. I said, we're closing. And everyone's going to go to the wake and the funeral, and we're not charging vacation time or anything like that. Everyone's off, and this is how it's going to work. And I remember he looked at me like, no, he's a career village manager. So he's like, this isn't how it works. And I said, this is how it's going to be. You have to give me this. You have to trust me on this. And sure enough, the funeral action team, I think it was called, was put in place in DuPage County. And I remember, officers from your agency, came and handled our calls. And but it was a moment where, I looked at the village manager. I said, you got to let me do it this way. And he's like, oh, okay. It's kind of unheard of. So it is a tough moment, but ton of decisions on, because guys want the flag draped over the coffin, but it didn't happen on duty, so the protocol is not, and you have to explain that. And then they want, whose honor guard is going to be there, and you can't have our honor guard there because guys need to grieve and be a part of that. So it was just a lot of like, no, we're doing it this way, and at the same time, everyone's just emotional, and it was just really hard to deal with. My parents were both alive at the time, so I had never had a funeral in my life. So here I am doing a funeral for, one of our own officers. So,
speaking of your family, did the job were any of your siblings in law enforcement, and did the job have an impact on your family?
No, I never married, so I'm just me. And no, my parents were uber proud. When I told them I'm staying here in Chicago when my dad got transferred, that was just a horrific moment of emotion and everything, because I was the youngest. So, yeah, you're the youngest. You're your parents' youngest, and they're expecting you to go wherever they go. And they always thought my law enforcement want through my years was a fad, but when I got on, I remember my dad just he was at graduation, and he just super proud to see his son in a uniform, because none of us went into the military, followed his steps into the military. And then as I, became, into detectives, and then got promoted, and then, lieutenant, and they would fly in to all my promotions. And so those moments were always great. I had the luxury of having a large family, obviously, like I said. So I have, I think, 25 nieces and nephews, and we are always a very close family, and I was always involved in many of their lives. So they, but even then, none of them are in law enforcement either, and they're all adults now. Now they're having children, so never a conflict there at all.
Looking back, do you have any regrets?
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, just, it's easy to say, I was married to the job. I worked. Any bit of overtime, any special detail, and probably to the detriment of a personal and social life. I had my life, and I had a good life, but just chose never not to be married. So that's probably that's a regret, I think.
So how did you make the decision that it was time to retire?
It was just time. So I didn't have a date. I didn't have, so here in Illinois, you work your 30 years and you're done. I didn't even have that. I was able to buy my civilian time into my pension, so I knew that I had the amount of years. But I didn't have to work the 30. I think I did 28 and a half, but bought a year and a half to get to the 30. And I just realized it was time, in the sense of, okay, I was 5.5 years into the chiefdom, and, that's fairly standard, maybe slightly above average, usually 4 to 6, I guess. And not that we were getting stale, but I could just sense I didn't want to become stale, and I didn't want our agency to become where we were being passed by, or I was being passed by. I applauded myself that I could still do someone's fingerprints if I needed to. I could go out and still know how to write a ticket or do a report. We went to body cams, and we had the drama of 2020, and then we had a citizen group in town that was questioning how we were doing law enforcement and the blue line flag issue. And I think it just became a moment of, you know what, I've done well. I think our agency is in a good place, and I'm done. So I went to my village manager, and I think he would laugh about this, but we were in different buildings, obviously, so we weren't connected. We were just across the parking lot. But I picked up the phone and I said, "Hey, you got a few minutes? I got to pop over." And he goes, "Yeah, come now, because I got a meeting in like 45 minutes. So I walk over, and he said, "What personnel issues do you have?" Because it was usually that way. And I said, "Mine." And he stopped and he looked up and he said, "I thought I had you longer." And I said, "It's time. It's just time." And I said, I'm giving you, basically 6 months. So this was on November or September 1st, and I left in March, so of the next year. So there wasn't one thing that pointed to it. It's just, okay, I'm ready. I'm 57 years old. I've worked here 37 years. That was my total on the job at that agency. Now, if you count the Explorer time, it was like 40 years, but it was just a moment of, you know what, I'm okay. I'm ready to go.
Do you miss the job?
I do not. Not at all. I keep tabs, of course, on what's happening in the town I grew up in, and all the people I knew over the years, and the cops that I hired, and the ones that are promoted that I had a hand in promoting. So, I pay attention. But I absolutely do not miss the day-to-day of citizen calling or trustee calling you or the manager saying, "Hey, you're over budget," or whatever the case is. The only thing, and every cop who doesn't admit to this, I don't think is telling the truth, I do miss the roar of the lights and siren and going lights and siren. I mean, that's just great. How can man, those days where you were on the one end of town and you needed to get all the way to the other end and there was a lights and siren call. Man, that's good stuff.
So what are you doing now?
So I work at our local police academy. It's the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy, and it's a commuter academy, and it's located at our junior college, the College of DuPage. Actually coming up on our 30th year that it's been in existence, and I've worked there, I'm in my 23rd year there part-time, all my years on the job. I worked there as an instructor or class coordinator for 23 years. So when I retired, the classes over the last 6 or 7 years were getting really large, even though law enforcement wasn't, hiring as much, but we serve, 50 agencies, so you still had a ton of people to put through the academy. So they needed, can you come back as your old job as a part-time coordinator? big homeroom mom, I guess is the best way to describe it. You monitor the recruits and their duties, make sure they're squared away, the discipline. So I'm back to doing that, and it's just great. It's an easy job. It's part-time. I don't want to work full-time. I'm blessed that I don't have to work full-time. And I can come and go as needed, or as I please, or as they please. So I'm doing probably, 28 hours a week. Maybe on big weeks where we have practical training going on, I'm maybe doing 35. But I do believe you have to do something. Especially in our run and gun life, you can't just stop. You need to use your mind, whether it's working at Home Depot or doing something in law enforcement on a security level or a teaching level. I think it is hard, and that's why I applaud you in doing this format here, is because our minds can't just shut down. They need to keep going, and now they can slow down, but I still think you need to keep going in some way. So it's a fantastic job, seeing kids who, when you remember when you were sitting in that chair and when you were learning how to shoot and you were learning how to put on handcuffs, and now you're doing it as, someone 30 years later. It's really, really awesome. And I love it. I love mentoring, the next generation of law enforcement and the next leaders. I also do some promotional assessments for a couple of different companies. They hire you, and when they give us sergeants or lieutenants or even chief assessments, I do that on the side as well.
So, do you have any parting words of advice for? It could be somebody that's considering becoming a police officer, someone who's at that midpoint in their career, or even maybe some advice for someone who's considering retiring.
So we'll start on the front end of those who want to become a police officer. You know what? Get in shape and stay in shape. It's critical, especially now. Law enforcement is fairly volatile now. I think back when you and I started, if you had a fight, it was like, wow, you had a fight? How was that? Because it just wasn't that way. You didn't touch a policeman. Yeah, you may have been drunk and you swore at him, but, you didn't push him or you didn't resist. On occasion you had it, but now, or my last number of years, reading reports or looking at body cam and stuff, man, how people, one, treat and think they can just spit at you or just shove a cop or resist. Where did that come from? And to stay in shape, given the hours, what you eat, the rise and fall of your your body going a mile a minute to not, and then that ability to stay completely focused and not have that sensory overload on a hot call or a hot situation when you have to act. I think staying in physical shape helps you avoid that overload, that auditory exclusion, or the vision restriction, and your mind just going like this. So that my biggest advice for someone coming in is obviously get in shape and stay in shape. You don't have to go run 10 miles a day, but you know what? I tell these new kids coming in, your fitness starts. The ability to do 10 push-ups without being exhausted, or run a mile in 8 to 11 minutes. is really where you should be at every single day. And, I think that is huge. Those in the middle of their career, we've both experienced, right? That 7 to maybe 8 to 12 to 13-year-old guy who just, shuts down. And I always termed it like, put me in coach. I want to get off the bench. And I would always, try and go to people and say, hey, man, a lot of talent. A lot of talent. Let's get back in the game. Come on. What can we do? Whether it's sending them to the academy or making we used to call them 90-day wonders, where we take you off the street and put you into detectives for 90 days, or go shadow the drug unit. I think law enforcement doesn't, and now you can't do this in a lot of agencies just because of the sheer numbers and your economics, but we need to offer opportunities to, even if it's a short stint, maybe a 1 week, hey, go sit back in detectives and we'll fill the street. We need to do better on that to get to keep guys in the game, and it shows that you do care and you want them to have a good life and be prepared. Those who want to become part of their executive team, their promotional team, and take promotional exams, I 100% applaud that. Obviously, one is the financial gains, when you retire, and that additional salary, of course, it helps. But no, not everyone is called to that. I certainly understand that. I have very good friends who, were great patrolmen, and they stayed great patrolmen, and they retired as patrolmen, and that's fantastic. But if you have the gene in you that, can go to the next level, I highly, highly recommend it. In fact, there's a supervisor now at the police academy, and she's awesome. But she's at the patrolman level, and I said, you know what, your next test, you really need. No, I like what I'm doing. And I said, you know what, you got talent. You need to be in your leadership team. You should really think about it. Not, I don't say it, what are you, stupid? Just think about it. Look at the next vision. Be always looking ahead. And if you don't, I completely understand it. But don't just shut it down. For those who are ready to retire, I think you've probably heard this. Have something in place. A friend of mine, he works at Home Depot, and he loves it. He absolutely loves it. And he was never a handy guy. Not that you have to be to work there, but it just, it's like, you work at Home Depot? One guy drives a bus, and maybe that's the simpler side of their life that they want now, that, start the thing up and go. And, but I do think you have to have, you can't just stop. I think it's hard on our life to do that. Given the style of our alpha personality, if you will, and seeing everything that we've seen over the year, and to just, I think that's worse. So try and think about doing something and not just giving it the abrupt stop. And go to those, if your department does a retirement lunch, or you have a coffee club of retired guys, go to those, and laugh, that you can still still pal around with the guys, and I think that's really, really necessary. On the opposite side, though, don't be that guy that, stops in every week. Hey, just seeing what's going on. You don't want to be that guy either. So that's why you need something else so that you're not like driving into the station. I remember there is a guy who retired. We had a soda machine in the front lobby, and he retired, and he would come in to use the soda machine, and it's like, hoping someone would say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I always felt bad for that.
Chief, thank you for telling your story.
Well, that was awesome. This is great. Thank you, man. What a fantastic idea. I'm a subscriber, so make sure everyone who's watching, hit that button, as they always say, and subscribe. But thank you. This is I love it. I think this is such a great idea, and just good luck to you and everyone you talk to.
Thank you.